Alright guys, hope you're all keeping safe and only going outside when absolutely necessary. On this Wednesday's, or tomorrow's, State of the Game, Nikki Cuppins has confirmed that one of the major topics will be exotics and the changes that are coming to them. I've talked about exotics before, but I asked you guys, the community, in Monday's community post to give me your feedback on exotics, and I wanted to talk about some of your points, give my opinion, and just go over everything. So let's begin. So I was recently part of a Twitter thread where I said, yeah, it's a huge kick in the teeth. I was talking about exotic drops with low attributes. You should feel excited to pick up any exotic, but of the 3 I have got already, all of which have come from either challenging or heroic sources, none have rolled high. To which Nikki Cuppins, senior game designer at Massive, responded saying, totally agree with this point of view and we'll discuss it along with the upgrading part in next week's State of the Game, that's as in tomorrow. Now this is positive news. There has been a whole host of videos, social media and forums posts discussing how the devs could make exotics feel truly exotic. So let's take a look at what you guys said. First up, we've got a comment from Toddy's Time who says, I don't mind them being hard to get, but the fact that they can have random rolls is a terrible system. Every single exotic I have has terrible stats. It seems a bit unfair. Now, as you can imagine, the theme of this comment was a pretty consistent theme across most of your guys' response. The fact people feel they are being rewarded for their time of an exotic rolling terrible stats. Now, I certainly feel the same way. Like I said, I've only had maybe 4 or 5 exotics drop at this point from both challenging and heroic sources, but all of them have rolled pretty low. Actually, except for my God rolled Diamondback and Pestilence, those did roll pretty well. I mean, I want you to take a look at this chameleon that I had drop. You know, it's got really crappy low rolls. If you just search on Twitter or anywhere else, there are plenty of examples showing exotics with unbelievably low rolls. So I guess the question is, how do we fix this? Well, my proposal is pretty simple. Right now I believe that the roll range on exotics mimic those of high-end items, although in many instances I've seen some really bad rolls drop from heroic bosses, for example, so I'm not so sure. Well, my proposal is to increase the minimum roll range of exotics above that of high-end minimum rolls. If, for example, you have a high-end minimal roll range from an heroic boss drop, say 75%, put an exotic drop at say 85%, legendary 95 to 100%. Now, I used a boss drop as an example here because there are different minimum ranges depending on whether it dropped from an NPC or it was taken out of a chest, for example. So another question I have is, should exotics that drop from an NPC drop at the same roll range as from a crate, for example? Hopefully that made sense, and if it did, let me know what you think in the comments below. Ultimately, they do drop far too low in roll ranges, and this shouldn't be happening, I don't believe, for such a low drop chance exotic item. Next up, and a comment from C.XO, they should allow us to recalibrate them. Also, some exotics are underperforming and need to be reworked. Like, who the hell is using the chameleon? Alright, so when I read this comment, my immediate reaction was to the chameleon. I have a chameleon, as I just showed you guys, and it generally has bad rolls, but just the weapon itself, it is far inferior to other high-end weapons in the same category. Sure, it's got some unique talents, but like most exotics, these require some significant time to proc, and by that time, other high-end weapons have far surpassed the weapon in power. This, I think, is apparent for a lot of exotics, and I think the devs need to reassess how exotics currently work, for the most part. On the question of recalibration, this is something I'm very much on the fence with. I've had a lot of people reach out to me on Twitter with this same question, and my answer was always the same. I just don't know. What do you guys think? If they can fix exotics, i.e. the roll range and the power, then I'd probably have to say no. But on the other hand, if you can recal other tiers, then there's an argument exotics should get the same treatment to keep them on the same level. I just don't know. I'd like to see what you guys have to think about that. Next up, and we've got a comment from OSXGP, and they said they need to bring out the level 40 upgrade blueprints for existing exotics. It's been long enough. Alright, so I totally agree with this, and I've said this before. I am at 99.9 reoccurring% sure this is something the devs will confirm in tomorrow's State of the Game. They'll probably confirm when it's going to happen as well. It would likely come as part of TU9, I imagine, so probably towards the end of April. I don't know for sure, but that's what I think. The devs wanted players to search for the new exotics before they allowed a way to upgrade blueprints to level 40, but now that it's been a month, I'm sure they're going to allow it to happen. It'll probably happen at the end of this month. That's what I think. Okay, so moving on, we've got a comment from Trent Goldsby, who says, currently they'd be better used as paperweights than weapons. Massive seems to have it in their minds that when exotics are in a pre-buff state, they should be weaker than every other weapon and only act After activating their talent, they become slightly better than high-end gear, which for the most part makes them a waste of time. Exotics must be powerful, else it defeats the purpose of the weapon being exotic in the first place. Okay, so this comment goes back to what I said about the pre-proc state or pre-buff state of exotics, which mean that when they do finally proc, while some exotics, not all, become better than high-ends a little, it's far too late because those high-end weapons have had a significant amount of time to outperform those exotics. This, I think, is one of the biggest issues with the exotic power. And I'd like to see the devs look more into this notion because I think it's the main reason why most exotics don't feel very powerful. Not all, of course. The Eagle Bearer is still very much powerful. Pestilence is still very much viable. But there's a lot of exotics in this game that just simply don't feel powerful. And like I said, it takes a while to get there. And when it gets there, it's too late. Now, there is an identity issue with exotics as well. The devs have changed their mind on what exotics should be on numerous occasions. Pre-TU8, every exotic dropped full power. Now they don't, and before TU7 they didn't either. So there is an identity issue, and they need to figure that out as well so they know where exotics fit in the game. But when I hear exotic, I expect power and uniqueness. And I think right now there may be some uniqueness there with certain stuff, but the power is really lacking. Alright, next up, and a comment from Michael Lagomarsino. I probably butchered that, apologies, but the comment said, I feel like they buffed the drop rate. Just got a god roll Pestilence in the DZ, along with the Merciless and Chameleon within the last few days. And I've actually seen a lot of stuff about this. I'm not sure if that has been a stealth buff to exotics at this point, but I've seen plenty of people say they've played for a couple of hours and just recently got numerous exotics, something that had not happened to them before. On the contrary, I've seen people say that that's not happened for them, and you know it's still as bad as ever when it comes to the drop rates, or as low as ever, not as bad as low. So I just don't know. The question is, should the drop rates on exotics be increased, or should they remain at a low drop chance? Now, I understand why people might want to see them increased because, you know, some people have simply just not got any. But for me, if they can make them powerful again and fix the roll range, I think they have to be a low drop chance. And I think the way they are currently with a low drop chance is probably just fine. They should be a rare occurrence, but they should also have that power to them as well to give you that reward for that rare occurrence. If they're going to remain as they are, then they probably should buff the actual drop chance of them because they're just average. And if they're an average drop, they should have a higher drop chance. So that's my input on the drop chance. All right, so moving on, and we got a comment from TSW Arm 2010. And they said, getting an exotic should be an event. I would rather they come god rolled and less common. Also, like you've said in past videos, let's give us some challenges to get them rather than lucky drops. I wanted to put this comment here because of exactly what I've said before. I don't think every new exotic should just be put behind RNG, as with Warlords of New York. Now, whilst the Nemesis was put behind a time wall, which is not something I particularly agree with, the puzzle to get the pieces was something I actually preferred much more than just praying to RNGesus. The same could be said for something like the Eagle Bearer, where you're required to complete a certain task or a challenge to get certain exotics. And it doesn't have to be something difficult. You could be rewarded for time played or the amount of NPCs you've killed, for example. And this wouldn't apply to all of them as well. If you had, say, 15 new exotics, for example, in an update, maybe have 5 of them behind challenges or puzzles and the rest RNG. It would just be nice to have some variety, I believe. Alright, next up, and this comment is from Necropsychosis, which is a rather unusual name, and they said, I would rather them fix the underlying issues that currently plague the game, that's all. Now, this is last, but it's certainly not least. Are exotics that important when compared to some of the underlying issues? Probably not, but it is something that needs to be addressed, I think, which is why the devs will be focusing on this topic tomorrow. You know, there's plenty of videos talking about the bugs and all the other things in the game, the negativity and stuff, but I wanted this video to provide some constructive, community-driven feedback on exotics and how the devs might consider moving them in a positive direction. So, to summarise this video, roll ranges on exotics appear to be too low, regardless of difficulty, and in some situations feel like they roll even worse than high-ends sometimes, although I don't think that's totally true. They need a higher minimum roll range, and I'd like your feedback on whether that should apply to exotics across the board, or whether it should work as it does now with other gear in the game. A low roll range from crates and a higher range from NPC drops. Exotics appear to have an identity issue, and the devs need to figure out what their role is within the game. Exotics can be powerful, and they can be more powerful than high-end equivalents. However, The pre-buff state of exotics are very low in power, meaning there is a lag time in reaching the requirement to have that power, which gives high ends a huge advantage, at least initially surpassing most exotics in power pretty easily. And lastly, there are reports of increased drop rates. If true, should this remain the same, or should the drop rates remain really low, as long as exotics are fixed to actually feel exotic? That's it for this one though, guys. Thanks very much for all of your support, and until tomorrow's recap video of State of the Game, epic out.